When Daniel Lewis died, the house did not feel real anymore. Margaret stood in the living room after the funeral, staring at the quiet walls. The flowers from church sat on the table. Sympathy cards were stacked near the lamp. The front door had just closed behind the last guest. And suddenly everything was still. For 40 years, she had never been alone in that house. Daniel's laugh used to echo from the kitchen. His footsteps were heavy and familiar. Even the way he cleared his throat in the mornings was part of the rhythm of her life. Now there was nothing but silence. Margaret walked into their bedroom and sat on the edge of the bed. Gosh, Daniel's sweater was folded neatly on the chair. She pressed it against her chest and closed her eyes. She did not cry loudly. The tears simply rolled down her cheeks as if they had been waiting. She was 62 years old. Too young to feel this old, their son Michael arrived the next day from Seattle. He moved quickly through the airport, still wearing his work jacket. When he saw his mother waiting near baggage claim, her shoulders smaller than he remembered, he pulled her into a tight hug. "I'm here, Mom," he said. That night he slept in his old bedroom. Margaret could hear him turning in bed, just like when he was a teenager worried about exams. The sound comforted her in a strange way. House was not completely empty. The next morning, Michael started fixing things. The porch light had been broken for weeks. Daniel always meant to fix it, but kept forgetting. Michael climbed the ladder and replaced the bulb. Then he tightened the loose cabinet handle in the kitchen. Then he checked the heater in the basement. Margaret watched him quietly. She saw Daniel in his careful movements. It's the way he tested each screw twice. The way he wiped his hands on a towel after finishing. "You don't have to do all this," she said softly. "I want to," he replied. "Dad would have done it." The words hit her chest, but they also warmed it. Days passed quickly. Michael extended his stay. He worked remotely from the dining table during the day, typing on his laptop. In the evenings, he made dinner. Simple meals, pasta, grilled chicken, soup. Margaret had not felt hungry since Daniel's passing, but somehow she managed to eat when Michael sat across from her. One evening, she forgot to set 2 plates. She placed only one on the table. When she realized it, she froze. Michael gently reached into the cabinet and took out the second plate. "It's okay," he said quietly. After dinner, they sat on the back porch. The Ohio sky was painted in orange and purple. Daniel had loved sunsets. He used to say they were proof that endings could still be beautiful. Margaret stared at the fading light. "I don't know how to live like this," she admitted. Michael didn't rush to answer. He leaned back in the chair and looked at the yard where he had played baseball as a child. "You don't have to figure everything out today," he said. "Just tomorrow." The next morning he invited her for a walk. She refused at first. "I'm tired." "You've been sitting inside for weeks," he replied gently. "Fresh air won't hurt." Reluctantly, she put on her sneakers. They walked slowly down the familiar street. Neighbors waved. Some approached with careful smiles. Margaret managed polite responses, but her heart felt heavy. Halfway down the block, she felt her breath catch. Not from the walk, but from the memory. Daniel used to hold her hand on this exact path. She almost turned back. Michael noticed. "We can sit for a minute," he suggested. They rested on a bench near the small park. Children were playing. A young couple pushed a stroller. Life was moving forward, even when hers felt paused. "I feel guilty," Margaret said suddenly. "For what?" "For still being here." Michael looked at her firmly. "Mom, loving Dad doesn't mean you stop living." The words were simple, but they stayed with her. Over the next week, he encouraged small changes. He asked her to open the curtains in. The mornings, he played soft music while cleaning the kitchen. He suggested she call her friend Linda from church. At first, Margaret resisted everything. Change felt like betrayal. She laughed. Did that mean she was forgetting Daniel? If she stepped outside, was she leaving him behind? One afternoon, McKay came home from the grocery store with a flyer. "There's a painting class at the community center," he said. "You used to love painting." "That was years ago," she replied. "So I'm not good anymore." You know? Don't have to be good. You just have to show up. Gosh. She stared at the flyer. The thought of sitting in a room with strangers felt impossible. But the thought of spending another evening alone in a silent house felt worse. "I'll think about it," she said. That night she walked into the garage. Daniel's tools were still hanging neatly on the wall. She ran her fingers over the wooden workbench he had built himself. Instead of breaking down, she felt something different. A quiet strength. Daniel had always believed in her. He had pushed her to finish college. He'd encouraged her to start a small home bakery when Michael was young. He'd never treated her as fragile. Would he want her to hide from the world now? The next morning she surprised Michael. "I'll try the class," she said. He smiled in a way that reminded her of when he was 10 years old. And proud of a good grade. The first day at the community center, Margaret almost turned around at the door. Her hands trembled slightly. But she walked inside anyway. The room smelled of paint and coffee. A group of people sat around tables chatting. Most were her age. A woman with short gray hair waved her over. "First time?" the woman asked kindly. Margaret nodded. "Don't worry, we're all beginners here." For the first time in weeks, Margaret felt something close to normal. She picked up a brush. The canvas in front of her was blank. Waiting as she dipped the brush into blue paint, she realized something important. The pain in her heart had not disappeared, but it had shifted. It was no longer crushing her. It was becoming part of her story. That evening, when she returned home, she placed the half-finished painting on the kitchen table. Michael looked at it carefully. "It's beautiful," he said. "It's just a lake," she replied. "It's more than that." She knew he was right. It was the lake from their honeymoon, the one where Daniel had promised to love her through every season of life. Margaret went to bed that night feeling tired but not empty. Michael's time in Ohio was ending. His flight back to Seattle was booked for the following week. Margaret could feel the approaching goodbye, but it did not scare her as much as before, because something inside her had quietly begun to change. She was still grieving. She still missed Daniel every second of the day. But she was no longer completely lost, and neither she nor Michael could yet imagine how this small step, this simple painting class, would open a door to a future she never thought possible. Michael left on a gray Sunday morning. Margaret stood at the airport entrance and watched him walk toward security. He turned once, lifted his hand, and smiled. She smiled back, holding herself steady. When he disappeared into the crowd, she felt the familiar ache rise in her chest, but it did not break her this time. She drove home alone. The house greeted her with silence again, but now it felt different. Not cruel, just quiet. She placed her purse on the table and walked to the kitchen window. The backyard looked the same. The trees moved gently in the wind. Life had not stopped. She made herself a cup of tea and sat down with a flyer from the community center. The fall art exhibit was only a month away. Her instructor had encouraged her to submit one piece. Margaret stared at her painting of the lake. It was almost finished. The water reflected soft evening light. The small wooden dock stretched into the distance. She remembered standing there with Daniel decades ago, feeling young and certain about the future. Now she was older. The future was uncertain again. Instead of feeling sad, she picked up her brush. For the next few weeks, her days found rhythm. Mornings began with a short walk. Afternoons were for painting, evenings were for reading or calling Michael. He asked about her classes. She told him about new friends Carol, who joked about everything, and Denise, who always brought homemade cookies. "You sound lighter," Michael said one night over the phone. "I feel busy," Margaret answered. "It helps." The night of the art exhibit arrived sooner than expected. Margaret stood in front of her closet, unsure what to wear. Finally, she chose a soft blue dress Daniel once admired. She did not wear it to remember him with pain. She wore it to remember him with love. At the community center, small white lights decorated the walls. Paintings lined the room. Families and neighbors walked slowly from piece to piece, whispering compliments. Margaret's painting hung near the center. She stayed close to it, hands clasped together. Every time someone paused in front of it, her heart jumped. An older man stopped and leaned in slightly. He had silver hair, kind eyes, and wore a simple dark jacket. He studied the lake carefully, as if searching for something. After a long moment, he turned toward her. "This one feels personal," he said gently. "It is," Margaret replied. "There's peace in it," he continued. "But also longing," said she, swallowed softly. "It's about my husband." Nodded, understanding without more explanation. "I lost my wife 5 years ago," he said. "I still talk to her sometimes." Margaret did not feel awkward. She felt seen. "My name is Thomas," he added, "Margaret." They stood side by side, looking at the painting as if it belonged to both of them. The conversation moved naturally from art to family to memories. There was no rush, no pressure, just two people speaking honestly. When the evening ended, Thomas asked, "Would you like to get coffee sometime?" Margaret hesitated only for a second. "I think I would." Their first coffee meeting was simple, a small cafe near the river. Margaret arrived early, nervous in a way she had not felt in decades. When Thomas walked in, he waved with a shy smile. They talked about their children. Thomas had a daughter in Boston. They spoke about books, travel, and how strange it felt to cook for one person after years of cooking for two. Margaret noticed something important. Being with Thomas did not erase Daniel. It did not replace him. Simply created new space in her life. Weeks passed. Coffee turned into dinner. Dinner turned into long evening walks along the river. Sometimes they spoke about their late spouses openly. Sometimes they laughed about small things, the way Thomas always forgot his reading glasses, or how Margaret accidentally bought salted butter instead of unsalted. The warmth between them grew slowly and gently. One afternoon, while they were sitting on a park bench, Thomas said quietly, "I wasn't sure I could feel close to someone again." Margaret looked at the water moving steadily in front of them. Neither was I. There was no dramatic moment, no grand gesture, just a quiet understanding that life still had chapters left. Still, guilt visited her at night. She would lie in bed and wonder if she was moving too fast. If loving again meant she was letting go of the past. Finally, she called Michael. "Someone I've been seeing," she said carefully. There was a short pause on the line. "Tell me about him," Michael replied. She explained everything, how they met, how kind he was, how easy the conversations felt. When she finished, she waited. "Mom," Michael said warmly, "I'm happy for you. You are, of course. Dad loved you. He wouldn't want you to be alone forever." Tears filled her eyes. Not heavy tears, light ones. "You've always taken care of everyone else," Michael added. "Now it's your turn." After that call, something inside her settled. A few months later, Thomas visited her house for dinner. He admired Daniel's old woodworking bench in the garage and listened carefully as Margaret shared stories from her marriage. Instead of feeling threatened by those memories, Thomas respected them. "Love doesn't disappear," he said softly. "It changes shape." One evening after Thomas left, Margaret walked through each room of the house slowly. The living room where birthdays were celebrated. The hallway where Michael's height was marked on the wall. The kitchen where she and Daniel danced once. While dinner burned, she realized something clear. The house was full of history, but it was also too big for one person. Maintenance felt heavier. The empty rooms echoed at night. And now that her days were fuller with painting classes, friends, and Thomas, the quiet streets felt farther away from her new life. The idea came gently but firmly. She would sell the house. When she told Michael, he was surprised. "Are you sure?" "Yes," she answered calmly. "It's time." Neighbors reacted with shock. Some whispered that she was moving too fast. Others asked if she was planning to remarry. Margaret did not argue. She simply smiled. She listed the house in early spring. Packing took weeks. Each object carried a memory. She sorted carefully some items to keep, some to donate, some to pass to Michael. On the final day, she stood in the empty living room. Sunlight streamed through bare windows. She did not feel broken. She felt grateful. "Thank you," she whispered softly to the house, to Daniel, to the life they built. She moved into a smaller home closer to town. It had large windows and a small porch. Thomas helped her paint the walls a warm cream color. Michael flew in to help set up furniture. They laughed as they struggled with a bookshelf that refused to stand straight. The new house did not hold decades of memories. It held possibility. Margaret continued painting. She even sold 2 pieces at a winter market. Thomas often sat nearby reading while she worked. Their relationship grew steady and respectful, built on shared experience and quiet understanding. One evening, sitting on her new porch, Margaret realized something powerful. She had not chosen to forget her husband. She had chosen to live. Losing Daniel had felt like the end of her story. But with her son's support, her own courage, and the unexpected arrival of Thomas, she discovered that love could exist more than once in a lifetime. It would never look the same. But it was real. And for the first time since that silent afternoon after the funeral, Margaret felt not just alive, but hopeful.